most of the talking on those. All right, shall we move on to the next one then, Si?
Yeah, sure. And shall I just sort of, pick up on those things that we're hoping people will get out of the call as well, which was
please.
So just to whiz through those. So we're hoping that at the end, as we go through, you'll get a sense that you've got a sort of, hoping that you will go away with, if you like, an update on our financial position and sort of general progress across the sport. That you get an opportunity to see some of that information, ask questions, maybe get some understanding of things you weren't aware of. We really want to kind of people to go away with the sense that School Ultimate is moving on, but that also we've got quite a job all to do on local development and sort of making things a bit more accessible for more adults. Hopefully that you feel good about being a member of UK Ultimate and that you play Ultimate in this country. Some confidence that the people on the board and staff members, are making decisions to do things with the aim of sort of doing the right thing. Even on those occasions where you may disagree with what they end up doing, and then just a chance for some feedback. So hopefully for most people we'll hit some or most or all of those things over the next hour. I don't really think we're going to take 2 hours, and I'm sure everyone will be relieved to hear that, but we'll see. Okay, giving back to you, Beach.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to just got a very introductory slide really about UK Ultimate. So I think two points to make mainly out of this. Firstly, the top point, I suppose, which is that UK Ultimate is the recognised national governing body for UK Ultimate in all of those countries. So Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, and the whole of the UK. That's just the way it operates, and that we have to try and balance all those different elements out. The second main point, really, I think, is that clearly we're a membership organisation, and as you can see from the section above, most of what we do is funded by individual membership, whether it's events, coach education, and the like. But we also have a responsibility to govern and administer the sport for the long term, so not just for the current members but also for future ones and for the development of the sport in the country. And one of the balancing acts, I suppose, is always trying to get, or one of the things is always trying to get that balancing act right between making sure that we're looking after our current members and making sure that we're looking after the future of the sport in this country. And we're going to go through some of the numbers to show how we're doing that at the moment. Okay. Back to you, Si, I think.
Sorry, I was on mute. So another sort of introductory slide, really just to highlight the areas that we are responsible for and that people work on. So this is a fairly sort of standard way of looking at what an NGB does. If you go on, the Sport Scotland or Sport England website, you'll find a sort of list of what NGBs do that sort of looks a bit like this. So, it's administering the sport. So that's sort of, just organising and hosting competitions, but also the rules and regulations that go with those things. So that's not just the rules of Ultimate, but for us, it involves, spirit of the game and tracking that information, competition rules like how people qualify for different rounds or roster regulations, eligibility, that sort of thing. Potentially, certainly for, the higher level competitions, that might include thinking about anti-doping, and obviously as we do things with juniors, safeguarding too. So those sorts of things too. From a sort of management governance point of view, we obviously need to make sure that the business, is stable financially, that we do a good job of looking after people who work for and volunteer for the organisation. Quite a lot of sort of operational things, just sort of dealing with people, getting in touch with questions and so on. Our membership website. So, I'm sure everyone here would be aware that in the last couple of years, we switched over to a new membership system, which has you know, I'm sure not delighted everyone all of the time, but it, you know, to be fair, it has been probably a pretty good step for us. It's working quite well. It took away some GDPR concerns that we would have been really kind of dealing with otherwise, or, you know, more concerned with otherwise. Communications and IT. So, you know, just a sort of quick reminder that most of our comms goes out sort of through our website as newsletters that people can sign up to. If that's news to you, have a look for our newsletters and check which ones you might want to sign up for. And then we also sort of send links out on our Twitter accounts and Facebook and so on. But it's a, you know, that's a bit of a challenging area too, actually, especially at the moment. You know, kind of getting the communications to the right people all the right times is not straightforward. We have to work with quite a lot of other organisations. You'd be surprised. Obviously, you know, the World Flying Disc Federation we do quite a bit with, the European Federation too. Work quite a bit with other national federations, like the Irish, perhaps the most of all. And then other sports bodies in the UK, like BUCS, so that's the University Sport Governing Body. The Youth Sport Trust, who we've done a lot with on schools work recently, and also the Sports Council, Sport England, Sport Wales, and so on. Inevitably, then, you know, some commercial partners too. So, you know, you might think of Discraft, our insurance provider that we give quite a lot of money to every year. But also venue owners. You know, we obviously work with a lot of different venues around the country, and those are partnerships that we need to keep working on. And then just the development of the sport more generally. So promoting the sport to anybody, you know, anybody and everybody. Coach education, so working on developing coaching in the sport in the UK, participation growth, and then, you know, quite a big area of supporting and working with the Great Britain teams. So it's, you know, some of those things are, you know, can be quite chunky in certain years. Certainly the national team stuff this year has been pretty substantial. You know, looking after all the events is always a pretty substantial sort of area of work. You know, and so that, you know, it can be quite broad, I guess. There's quite a lot to get done. And it's done by quite a lot of people.
150.
Hi, somebody else? No, maybe not. Apologies if somebody was trying to ask a question that if you were, I didn't hear. I'll keep going and maybe flag up if there was something. So we've got about 4,500 members of UK Ultimate. So on this slide you're looking at, on the left-hand side is people who are volunteers, and the right-hand side is kind of people who are being paid. So we have an elected board. People stand on the board for sort of you know, rotations of 3 years, and, you know, can restand, but that's the sort of cycle. We have a number of subcommittees, so they're listed out there: women's competition, scheduling, uni, spirit, etc. You can see them on there. We also have volunteers that help with some of the event delivery. And I think in particular, especially after the year we've had, you know, highlighting the GB area is probably worthwhile. That, you know, with 21 teams, you know, the GB committee is overseeing a structure around all of those squads, and it's easily 50 people, you know, volunteering to do quite a lot across those teams, be it coaches, managers, and so on. UK Ultimate employs currently 7 people, 5 of us full-time. So that's myself, Chris is our administrator, Meg Price looks after events, Cheska, Tyler Weddle on coach education, and Anthony Bailey, who's here, on our schools development. We also have somebody called Ruth Flight, who you may have seen around the place. She works on our GB Juniors teams, and also Laura Atkins, who's our bookkeeper. And both Ruth and Laura work approximately sort of 20%, sort of a day a week kind of level. And then you know, there are contractors who work with us. So we have medical staff at tournaments that many of you will have seen, hopefully not too closely, and also at who work with our GB teams, although they very kindly, you know, do work for GB mostly at sort of below the appropriate rate, really. And then you know, there are a lot of tournaments going on, so we work with various people who help to deliver them, and at some of the time those people are being paid for the work they're doing there. So there's quite a lot of people involved in what's going on. Hopefully that gives a sense for who's there, and we're always happy to get more help. Although I think quite a lot of the folks on the call already are. But you know, if you're not and you want to, then please get in touch. There's always stuff going on. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Shout if any questions, but otherwise, I guess we're going to keep going. As Graham mentioned earlier, we, at the beginning of last year, kind of published a plan. First time we'd ever done it, published a strategic plan for 4 to 5 years. I guess it seemed most appropriate that at the AGM we would sort of just work our way through referring to the main points of that. So that's what we're intending to do now for the next, half an hour or so. These are the areas. We sort of split them up into sort of the red bits at the bottom, which are sort of core functions, things that we would always need to be doing as a governing body. And the sort of the blue bits at the top, if you like, were sort of, perhaps temporarily strategic kind of objectives that we have to put some focus towards. So we're going to start off with the sort of finances, as you might expect. And I think hopefully at this point, Wayne, I'm going to hand over to you for a little bit.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Si. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Wayne Davey, and I've been on the board as the treasurer of UK Ultimate probably for about 10 years now. So I've been through a few of these AGMs. This is trying to give you a summary of the finances of the organisation. We're quite a large sort of body, and we need to, Si's just mentioned we have 7 staff. We're an employer. There's a lot of regulations we have to fulfil. And we have quite a lot of money coming in and going out all the time, size of a small company, really. The screen that you can see shows the last 3 completed years at a top level view, just an overview of the total income and expenditure. If you've looked at them, the thing you'll notice most of all is that Worlds that we held in 2016 is an enormous event that kind of dwarfs a typical year for us. That created a lot of work at the time, but also has created a surplus that we've been able to invest in the last couple of years. Si's already touched on the kind of things we do, but when we look at that in financial terms, the main sources of income we have are ignoring GB for the moment, our events, the membership fees everyone pays, and then we also earn money from the coaching courses that we run. And we're trying to develop some other income streams, but they're still fairly small at the moment. That's things like selling discs, sponsorship, and other sort of partnership arrangements, but they're quite a small amount at the moment. And we spend our money on the costs of the events and paying our staff who run all the day-to-day operations alongside the volunteers. The bit that's hidden a bit from that is our GB squads are also a big piece of the finances. We try and break even every year, well, down to each individual squad. So there's a lot of work managing that and making sure that we collect all the money that we spend and we do our best to break even on those costs. If you look at the figures at all, you'll see we made a large surplus in 2016. We made a conscious decision to invest that in development of the sport. So we've employed Ant to work on development for a 2-year stint. You'll see we lost a fair bit of money, 2017, 2018, and 2019 is similar to 2018. We're bringing those losses, getting them a bit smaller. That's all planned expenditure. So the fact we've spent more than we've earned the last couple of years, it's not a problem. We look forward about 4 years normally in financial terms. Si and I are just working on the 2020 to 2023 budgets and forecasts, aiming to be as close to break even as we can afford to be for those years. we're hoping we should bring that to break even. The whole organisation, we need financial stability in order to be able to commit to entering teams at tournaments, hosting events at large venues and so on. But the organisation is there to spend money on its members and developing the sport. So we try to break even as a whole over the long term, but try to keep sufficient reserves to cope with unforeseen events and to plan ourselves. That's about all I was going to say on finances, I think.
Thank you, Wayne.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Wayne. So, sort of just very closely connected to that is our membership. So we just wanted to sort of identify where we're at. So that chart that hopefully you can see is an indication of the way membership has changed over the last 10 years. And it's been pretty flat for a while. And I think that's something that we are really going to have to put more attention to over the next 2 or 3 years. As I say, we've been at about 4,500 for a little while. I think it might, interesting to, ask about, theorize about why that place would be where we stop. I think I've personally got a couple of ideas about it, but so that's where the income is. Actually, that's a 2019 income number, I think, for this area, for the membership. And as I say, we are sort of trying to look at that, what's sort of pausing the growth question. One thing we have been doing recently is just trying to look at the way membership has changed over the last few years, or sort of look at the membership data. We do have a pretty high turnover. I think probably most of us might expect that, but it was actually higher than I expected it. So it probably, probably losing about 20% of members each year, which also indicates that we're recruiting quite a lot of people. But that's a lot, I think, and clearly, something that we need to be trying to think about how we do something about as a community. Really, what is it that's making life hard for folks to keep playing? So there's something there to work on. One positive, I think, is that the ratio of female players does continue to increase, albeit somewhat slowly. And the uni membership in particular is now, is staying above 40% and still going up. We're at 42 now. And hopefully the changes that are going on in the university area will continue to support that change. Club affiliation is something that we've been trying to get clubs to do. I think we have good reasons for wanting to kind of clarify the relationship between clubs and the governing body, and it's a bit of it's not been something that clubs have jumped on. Some do. I mean, one thing that I think is interesting about that number is that actually, of the list of affiliated clubs, most people probably wouldn't recognise 4 or 5 of the clubs that are on that list, because one of the things we see is that people who don't tend to come to competitions but do have a functioning ultimate club want to connect with the governing body through something like this. So we have, I think, at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 clubs on that list who I think most of us, you wouldn't generally see at tournaments. One because it's a very juniors based club, and another one because it's in North Devon and doesn't play outside of North Devon very much, and so on. So we are going to be kind of looking to really push on the established clubs to engage with that a bit more. We do want to flag up in the AGM a change that we decided. So folks who've been around for a while will know that we went for many years, maybe 15 or 20, without changing the affiliation for the membership fees, and then had to hit a bit of a jump. And so we took the view that it would be probably better to be putting in a small increase every year. So the board made a decision to do that. We did it for the first time this year, putting in a small increase. And the plan is that it will be sort of, we'll take a look at inflation and then round to the nearest 50p, unless it takes you back to 0. So, they'll probably go up by 50p or £1 for the next few years. Obviously, we're going to keep reviewing that, but I think we're just sort of wanting to sort of put that out to people and say, you know, it is a plan for the time being that we will be putting small incremental increases on the membership for a little while, just to help shore things up, but also just to make sure that we don't do the thing that we had before where we kind of got a bit behind with it, arguably. With Go membership, which I mentioned earlier, we are also slightly better placed to collect a bit more data. So we are going to be pressing teams to kind of confirm who's playing at their competitions over the next year and going forward. And obviously there are competition reasons for doing that, back to the bit about, you know, competition regulations, but actually it's also potentially quite an interesting source of data for us in terms of understanding just sort of patterns of participation for people, really. I mean, anonymously, but still in terms of, you know, the numbers of people that play, how often they come to competitions and so on. So we're trying to do a bit more to gather that data so we can put that data into the sort of thinking and planning for the future. Which might also open up, I think, alternative ways of doing some of that membership. So obviously at the moment we just have this sort of one method of doing things where people join for a whole year and so on. And, you know, maybe we should be looking at other ways where people can access some of that a different way, especially if they don't enter very many competitions. If they're sort of just playing once or twice a year, maybe there are other ways of doing it. So, but we'd be better off trying to understand the sort of participation data first. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We have done a bit of work testing out a sort of donation along membership renewal. So the first year we did that, we got a fair bit of uptake, you know, added about 1% to the membership, but it dropped back. I mean, probably not surprisingly, we probably need to put a bit more work on communication around that area. But I mention it because quite often in previous AGMs, it's come up, people have said, well, why don't you just push up the membership fees significantly more to bring more money in? And we've been sort of reticent to do that, really. And so sort of halfway house was to put a, you know, easy donation option on there just to see what happened. So, you know, more work to do there, but I think I did just want to sort of mention that we've done that. So yeah, hopefully it makes sense. All right, so that was our sort of membership and finance and governance area. Just going to talk a little bit about the Great Britain teams. This slide is a catastrophe, really, isn't it? Sorry about that. So, but lots of pictures of happy teams. These are some of the grass teams, and that table there is showing the results of our grass Great Britain teams that competed in 2019. 13 of them, 13 teams there. So you should see in each column, you know, the left-hand column for each group is the finishing position, and the right-hand number is their spirit score, and also where they placed in the list of teams. Across the 21 GB teams, we had 5 winners. Some of those are, so there's a mix of, we had teams at Worlds and European Championships this year, but so we had 21 winners, 4 other medalists, 4 teams that won the Spirit of the Game award, actually, and 3 others that were in the top 3. We do have a couple of teams that had slightly lower scores. We do have a bit of process there, so the sort of GB committee and Spirit committee would normally pick that up, and there would normally be a conversation just to sort of check in really with the folks running those teams about what went on. I think we all know that the Spirit scores are useful, but not always perfect, so it's good for us to sort of just check in and understand and work out whether anything needs doing or needs to be discussed or worked on. The beach teams, actually that's not everybody who was at the beach, but they were the folks that managed to make it to the picture, I think. And again, pretty successful few days for teams there. Some other GB things to mention. So just a reminder really that Ali Tinknell took on a new performance director role, volunteer role that we put in place last year. So Ali's been doing that now for a year. And actually at this meeting last year, we talked a bit more about GB, and Ali talked quite a bit. So we weren't going to kind of revisit all of that today. Ali or I, or always happy to answer questions and so on. I think a couple of things that I would mention. So Wayne's already mentioned the money, and it bears repeating, I think. So from a player point of view, it's expensive. I can see some people on the call here who already know that firsthand. But I have to say, whilst that's definitely not something that any of us would particularly like, I don't think there's much indication it's going to change soon, especially across kind of 20 teams. So I think it is probably a bit of a fact of life for the time being. You've seen from what Wayne showed that those costs, for the most part, do go through UK Ultimate, and so in 2019, approximately £300,000 of GB-related costs are going through UK Ultimate, which isn't necessarily everything, but it does mean that those GB teams do potentially represent quite a risk to the organisation, something that we have to pay attention to. We have already, for example, paid out quite a bit for the 2020 teams. So all of the teams going to World Championships in Netherlands, we've already paid out accommodation fees for them. We've paid out team fees for, I think, all 8 of the teams that are playing at various Worlds next year. And that's great, because it means it takes short-term cash flow pressure off individual players. It's not so long ago that a player would have been having to make those payments. So I think that's positive, but it does mean it requires us to have some reserves. It does mean that it's useful to our teams or so on that we have, strong enough reserves to be able to do that sort of thing. A couple of other points you may or may not know, we're pretty solidly number 3 in WFDF's world rankings, and have been for some time. We're still hanging on in there at the moment. And some of that is because, traditionally we, as a community, send almost all the teams to all the available competitions. And the rankings do a mixture of recognizing good results and broad participation. So, we shouldn't hide from the fact that it's a combination of those things, but it's still pretty cool. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that the sort of main thing that the committee is currently working on, other than just making sure that all the teams are running, is some work to create a kind of competitive training hubs, regional competitive training hubs, for sort of 18 to 24-year-old group of players. So the sort of pre-GB training level, if you like, to try to give access to more competitive training for folks at that age. And we've got somebody lined up to take the lead with that, and hopefully there'll be some more news about that in the next month or so. Okay, that was GB. So competitions and events. We typically try to avoid spending too much of the AGM talking about events and competitions, just because otherwise they might absorb the whole day. Just some reminders, I suppose, in a sense. So we run over 50 a year, coordinating or directly running them. In 2018, the turnover associated with those events is about 180k. It's going to be a bit higher in 2019. Just a few numbers. So the university area is obviously, really important to Ultimate in this country. So we have a really steady 70 institutions, about 500 teams across the different divisions. That's with sort of first and second and third teams in some of those groups, and teams in different divisions. From a club outdoor point of view, saw a small increase in the number of clubs involved playing last year. The number of teams pretty static, actually. And really just to note that we did make some changes last year relating to the structure. So we sort of tried to move away a bit from the tour, and sort of reorganize things a little bit. It's not all that different, but there are some changes, and primarily we're just trying to increase flexibility, really. The main difference was that we had more local, smaller competitions than we've had for some time. We're pretty confident. So firstly, I think those things worked reasonably well, not perfect in all cases, but it was a good start, I think. We definitely saw players engaging in some of those competitions who would not normally have been traveling to the more national structure that was there before, which was one of the things that we were seeking to achieve. The other thing we hadn't really kind of thought about until afterwards, but I think bears noting, is that actually for the rounds where we had several smaller local competitions, we did a quick estimate on the traveling that would have been involved compared to what had been there the year before. And we reckoned we halved the sort of player miles involved in people going to those competitions. So, you know, obviously it's a pretty rough and ready calculation. If anyone wants to do it more accurately, we'd be happy to sort of share some of the info and you could have a go. But I think, you know, it was a big enough difference that we felt that there was a sort of positive change. So, and I suppose we see that as, you know, good for players in terms of their pockets, but also just good in terms of, you know, cutting down on the number of cars driving around the place. I know we're small compared to the people going to watch Premier League football, but still. So yeah, that's that part, and we're going to continue with those changes. So we're, you know, the sort of structure we saw last year will be largely repeated in 2020, and we expect that to continue to evolve. Yeah, and I think one of the evolutions, if that's the right way of putting it, that I think is worth perhaps signposting to people is that I think we're heading towards the place where our very top teams, pick your, you know, favorite name for those, may be it the elite teams or the teams that compete in, you know, or seek to compete in Europe. I think we're approaching the point where more of the time those teams and players are likely to be in a slightly distinct competition structure from the next group of teams. We're clearly not there yet, but I think you can sort of begin to see that coming. And I think that'll be interesting because, you know, we're sort of to a community where everybody is there together, and I think it's an interesting change. We're not putting a timetable on that. Okay, so the other sort of core bit that we obviously, you know, want to talk about is spirit of the game. So I see Jimmy is on the call. Hi, Jimmy. So Jimmy took over the chair as the Spirit of the Game Committee a year, probably a bit more than a year ago actually now, and has done a great job actually of sort of getting that group back up and running. We're really actively kind of keeping track of club competitions, Great Britain teams and so on now. Made a few changes to how things work. So you'll have noticed that normally that now for most of our events, Spirit scores and comments are open, just openly available. We started off anonymizing whose scores have been submitted by and so on, but we've stopped doing that now. That committee does want more help, and even if you're not able to help here, you know, if you know other people that might be interested, please, you know, point them to the website or point them to us so that we can potentially link them up. In particular, we are, and actually we do have folks for this role, but we are creating a new role that will sit on both the university and the Spirit of the Game groups so that we can put some more focus onto the uni competitions. Traditionally, when we set up the Spirit of the Game committee, we started with the club stuff and the Great Britain teams. And so we want to extend that into the uni competitions, what we've been doing. And so that role is to help make that happen. And it's going to talk about schools in a bit, but one of the really interesting things about our conversations with the Youth Sport Trust and about taking Ultimate into schools is, as you would expect, quite a bit of interest in self-officiation and spirit of the game and so on. And they've been really interested to the point where they've been using Ultimate as a kind of case study into ways for people organizing school sport to reframe the way they run competitions, not always only about, you know, the most obvious of, you know, who wins, but some of those other bits that we get from our spirit of the game scoring systems. So they've been really interested in that, and they are in fact taking scoring of, you know, a sort of subjective values scoring system into some of the school games competitions in other sports. Which is really interesting. And I mean, we have worried about whether that removes a USP for us, but I think on balance, I think it's just positive. I mean, it's just a positive thing anyway, that people would be looking at school sport in some different ways. That's cool. And then actually, it probably just legitimizes some of the ideas that we have in those areas as much as it might remove a sort of USP for us. And the Youth Sport Trust have been pretty careful to attribute the work to us. In other words, they've not sort of, they've been pretty clear that they've been looking at Ultimate to take this forward. And then last comment was just that we've created a game advisor committee. That's been a sort of ongoing discussion for a while. The first bit of that for that group is just to advise on what we do with game advisors in UK competitions. We're not in any great sort of rush to roll them out across all games or anything like that, but just to sort of, to look at that question and help us introduce them. But also I think, probably most of us have got thoughts or stories about places where people could have done with some help understanding the rules. And I think that group, potentially can really help us with that. I'm going to keep going. Okay, so hopefully those are the sort of core things. Hopefully that all made some sense. I'm going to switch over to the sort of, the sort of 4-year priorities, if you like. And going to start with some schools development work. And at this point, I think I'm going to hand over to Ant. Are you there, Ant? Or have you disappeared?
Yep, I'm on. I've been unmuted now.
Oh, cool. Okay, grand. All right. I'll put you on the next slide and hand over.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ant.
Thanks, Anthony.
Cool. So as Si's already mentioned, we are very excited to now be part of the school games. We launched last September as an official sport within that sort of framework. Just to give you an idea, the school games is a Sport England funded initiative overseen via the Youth Sports Trust. They're responsible for about 4.6 million participation opportunities for young people last academic year. And being part of the school games gives us access to that huge network of schools, school game organisers and active partnerships. We've had the data through from last academic year. 781 schools across England reported Ultimate as an activity that was part of their provision within the school games. And those schools covered every single region of the school games as well. So the entire country, there's somebody probably local to you who is running Ultimate sessions within their school at some level, either within lessons as an after school club or as part of a competitive setup within school games. 3,736 young people were part of inter-school competitions. So that's young people who competed as part of teams or in an individual's event against another school. We don't have figures they don't provide figures for the participation within school at what they call intra-school competitions. So that number of actual people involved is probably significantly higher than that. The participation figures show that we've actually got a pretty much 50-50 gender split, which is fantastic to see. The format we are suggesting that school games organisers use is a 4-on-4 mixed setup, where you've got 2 male, 2 female on pitch at all times. So we've actively pushed to try and achieve that 50-50 gender split, and it's great to see that that's come through in the numbers. And as I mentioned, we've got activity being recorded across the country in all the regions. Yep. Again, as Si's mentioned, the fact that we have this Spirit of the Game system has been very much seized upon by the school games. They were always very interested to see how it worked. And it very much aligns with something they've been doing for a number of years, which is talking about 6 different themes that sport should develop beyond the physical skills aspect of it. You can see those 6 themes across the bottom there. They've used us as a bit of a case study, really, to see how what we do works and the degree to which it engages young people. We've had such success in the last 12 months that actually the school games have now started to develop their own scorecard, which looks remarkably similar to what we're all familiar with, but attributing scores to their 6, what they call spirit of the school games values areas. So, as I said, that we're being recognised for that new direction we bring to competition, and that new focus we put on the people who are playing with the right attitude and bringing the correct atmosphere into the game. This here is a quick quote. I'll give you a few moments to read it, but this was from an event that we ran in Tameside that we supported, where the school games organiser didn't take down the actual game scores at all throughout the whole event. They just collected spirit scores. And at the end of the event, the medals were awarded to the players who had been scored most highly for spirit of the game, rather than for actually winning the tournament. And that's not a direction we're necessarily pushing people to. We still want people to see Ultimate as a competitive sport. But it was fantastic to see that the school games organisers are treating school spirit of the game with such respect and giving it such prestige within their events. Moving on, just back to the schools affiliation, which is a scheme we've been running for a number of years. It does a number of things. It allows us to keep an eye on how many schools are actively playing Ultimate, how many pupils they have, but it also gives schools the benefits of being able to play in our UKU run events under their own insurance, and also gives them the ability to access a number of deals and discounts on the purchases of Ultra Stars and J Star discs. So at this point in 2019, we've still got another month or so to go, but we've got 162 affiliated schools this year. And across those schools, we've got almost 17,000 pupils who are recorded playing. And that, again, can be anything from a couple of lessons as part of PE through to a fully fledged extracurricular club with 50, 60 attendees on a weekly basis. We've sold or sent 550 discs out to schools, youth organisations, school games organisers in the last year. And across the last year's worth of events, these are the UKU run events, we've had 29 schools taking part. It's great to see that number increasing every year. And of those 29 schools, we've had 115 teams sent to our events. And we're actually about to run our biggest ever junior women's indoor nationals, which is very exciting. And then finally, we took part in the World Schools Ultimate Championships this summer. It's the first time this event has ever run. It's a 5-on-5 outdoor mixed event. So it's a 3-2 gender split on pitch. And Twycross House School, also known as Flux to those who are familiar with the junior ultimate scene, they represented England at this event. It was held in Le Mans in June, and congratulations go to them. They finished second at that event, earning themselves silver medals. So congratulations to them for that.
Yeah, just one point on that England thing is that that's a sort of structure of the organisation that interfaces into that World Championships. And so actually there's a potential opportunity for us to send a team from England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland at some point in the future if that continues to grow and happen.
Great.
Cool. And I think that's everything, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Just before we move off your stuff, Ant, I just wanted to say a couple of things really. So first of all, to remind everybody that what Wayne said, that after the financial success we had running Worlds back in 2016, the board took a deliberate decision to invest that surplus into the development of the sport, and the work that you've just seen Anthony talking through and heard him talking through is the result of that. That's exactly what we were investing in, and thank you to Anthony for doing that. The other point I think to say is that in making that investment, we had taken a decision about a fixed term period of time that we were asking Anthony to do that work for us, and that's coming to an end fairly soon. So this is a really good opportunity for us all to say a massive thank you to Anthony for the tremendous work he's done. Those numbers are really, really impressive. So thank you very much, Anthony. And I think we can see from that in terms of spreading the sport and increasing participation and knowledge of the sport, we've made some huge steps in terms of our work in schools, and we thank you for that. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to move on then. Thanks, Ad, to talk about briefly a little bit about coach education. Some quick numbers. So those numbers there on the screen are typical but slightly higher of a usual year. So it's fairly normal that we would have about 100 people go through our level 1 each year. The Foundation Award and the level 1X, which I'll explain in a moment, are up a bit actually, and I think we're seeing those going up as a sort of indirect outcome from the ongoing interest in schools, basically. And so we've seen kind of jumps in some of those things. We put information out through the School Games Network, and we get approached by people interested in doing Foundation Awards. So that Foundation Award is a sort of 2.5-3 hour fairly straightforward workshop that we give mostly to PE teachers. The level 1X is a version of our level 1 qualification that is aimed at people who are not players. So they're new to the sport, but it's based on the assumption that they're already sports teachers or sports coaches. So we skip some of the material in the level 1 that is about thinking about coaching and teaching, and instead sort of spend that time on some of the basics of throwing and catching and the rules and so forth. We have also had sort of 4 or 5 more people complete their level 2 qualifications, so congrats to them. It's great. The income number there is sort of fairly stable. We normally get that sort of number in. That does mean though that we spend more on coach education than we bring in income. And if we can grow that Foundation Award, that sort of sports teacher market, if we can grow that, some more, we can put more of a dent in that. But it's likely that we're always going to be somewhat subsidizing some of that work, I think. Cheska's put in a really big effort this year on sort of highlighting people who coach. If you haven't seen it, we've got a sort of mini website called coachprofiles.ukultimate.com, where we've been just sort of collating stories and ideas and information from people who coach. I think we recognize that as the sport has been growing, it's somewhat lacked a culture of always having people coaching. And so we wanted to just highlight people that were doing it. And so we put quite a bit of effort into that area. And, hats off and thanks to folks who do that. I think there's some people on this call who are on there. But if you haven't seen that, go and have a look. It's really good. It's really interesting to see. And just to hear what the folks think about what they're doing and what they've enjoyed and so on. Cheska's also just, we've just been trying to do some work really on the way things work after level 1. So we definitely have had challenges for folks that have wanted to, do more after level 1. And it seemed like the only way to go was to do a level 2. And that's, there's quite a jump actually in terms of sort of commitment and so on. And, what we're working on at the moment is trying to put in place a bit more of a kind of continuous development pathway with smaller bite-sized sort of chunks, I suppose, of, opportunities to sort of work with other coaches or also things that we're putting on, and also point folks towards coach education material outside Ultimate and other organizations that deliver those things. So that people kind of continue to access opportunities to think about what they're doing and learning other things, without necessarily only focusing on, well, the next thing I have to do is a UKU level 2. So lots of those other things will accrue credits, and we're really, hopeful and expecting that it will make the process slightly more accessible to more people, so that they can pick out some of the things they want to do and gradually work towards the sort of the end point of potentially kind of qualifying for level 2 if that works for them. But otherwise, accessing just discussions and conversations and other presentations, etc., that might be relevant to them, without necessarily being worried about whether it makes them a level 2 coach or not. Please look out for those things. We've got one announced already that James Burbage is running for us in a couple of weeks, but there are other online forums. We're hoping, for example, to have Dr. Kenny, who works with quite a few of our GB teams, providing some input on the FIFA 11 Plus warm-up regime and injury prevention aspects there. So, and they'll be sort of delivered a bit like this, so quicker, shorter, hopefully accessible online rather than people needing to travel around. So take a look. Please engage with them and let us know how they work. Great. Okay, keep going. Want a bit of an update on some of the aspects of what's going on from a gender equity point of view. I think I mentioned already that the university membership has crept up above 40%. Some other stuff that's happening. So we had last year, or back in I think February, the first Uni Women's Div 2 competition. So we've reached the point of having a second division there. Hopefully people will be aware that, well, it's actually next week, next Saturday, we've got the first Bucks League fixtures in the women's outdoor division happening. We've got a slightly different format to the men's division, where the games take place on a sort of central venue basis. So most people are traveling to a location to play 2 or 3 games next Saturday, and then the remaining 2 or 3 games in their league will take place at another date in February. These different formats have pros and cons, I guess, but the input we had from players was that doing something on a Saturday like that, rather than going straight to the kind of one game on a Wednesday afternoon, was likely to work better. So we'll see. It's not been plain sailing getting everything up and running, but I think we're nearly there. I think there's every reason to be really optimistic and excited about where that's going. And it did immediately result in a few more teams entering than had the previous year. All of them, I think we lost one, but 45 teams still appear to be expecting to play on Saturday, which is great. This year we've got women's indoor club regionals happening for the first time, and I think Ant's already mentioned that the junior women's indoors that's coming up is the biggest one we've had. Still a one-day competition, but it is growing. It's in London this year at the Cranford Indoor Superdome. There are folks based in London that want to come and check out that junior women's indoor tournament. Please come along. And as already mentioned, school games, gender split. A couple of other things to mention. We did attempt to get some funding from Sport England. They had a workforce diversity fund. We approached them to try to get some funding to direct towards increasing the number of female coaches in Ultimate. We were slightly unsuccessful. I think largely just due to the number of applications. There was little feedback about whether we'd got our sort of plan wrong. So, and then I think the other thing to mention is the Women's Committee sort of primary focus for the coming year will be on sort of trying to work with uni players and make sure that those players have visibility and understanding of where and how there are other opportunities to play outside of uni. I think one of the sort of themes we've heard back quite often for players is that they aren't even necessarily aware that they could play outside of uni, and then if they are, it's not always straightforward to find teams or places to play, and so we're trying to put some work in on that problem. Okay, and then just going to move on to talk a bit about the area of broadening access for adults rather than the schools and juniors. So So Sport England have a survey, they call it Active Lives. I've looked for the Scottish and Welsh. I didn't find if they had a similar survey. I haven't been able to pin that down. I think they do some of that data differently. That Sport England survey estimates, comes out every 6 months, and it sort of tends to put the number of people playing Ultimate or disc games in the 60 to 70,000 range. The most recent one, I think, was 73,000. Which is, in some ways, I think, for what we can see around us, probably quite a high number. But that said, I think it's pretty clear that from a sort of more directly connected to the way, UK Ultimate members play and so on, we are seeing, as we've said a couple of times, sort of limited progress on increasing participation. So we've looked again at that as from a board point of view in the last couple of months, and we're really, I suppose, looking at the strategic plan, saying, well, this is the area that's sort of that we're least successful with right now, and we need to do something about it. So we're redoubling our efforts and attention, I suppose, in this direction. I think it's probably pretty clear then that we don't really have a structure, or at least there's good reason to think that maybe we should be trying to encourage some sort of structure that more directly puts effort on this problem. So hopefully we can put in some work with people to encourage, some sort of structure, whether they're, entirely autonomous from us, or hopefully working, together in a kind of network, with different regional groups and coordinated sort of discussion there. Certainly, we're aware, you may be aware that there's a group in Scotland having a pretty active conversation about doing something akin to this at the moment, which is great. And so we're hoping to be able to kind of get involved in that conversation, or at least support what that group wants to do, and see what else we can sort of learn from there to take to other parts of the country, and to build something where people have a sort of really direct attention on just creating more opportunities to play locally. I think akin to that, or sort of alongside that, we recognise that, as the way we're set up financially, and as Wayne discussed, we're kind of focused on current members. The money, for the most part, that we have in UK Ultimate comes from current members, and I think that creates a bit of a conflict about the extent to which the organisation might spend that money, or how much of that money might get spent not on current members, if you like. And to date, we've tended to really work on the basis that for the most part, that money is for spending on things that the current members are involved in. And I think that's a conversation that needs work. The major piece of development investment we did came from World's profits, not from our current members. So we assume, I think, that that we have to build up donation, grant, sponsorship money to put ourselves in a position to have money to invest in this area, and that's what we're going to be doing. But I think it's it's fair to say those aren't straightforward areas to increase the income substantially. So certainly an area where we're going to be needing to work with folks around the country. And then I think it sort of seems, at least to quite a few of us, sort of fairly self-evident that one of the biggest problems we have is a competition structure that's entirely dependent on weekend tournaments. And so we're certainly intending to be trying to push additional competitions that will allow folks to get involved in them on a sort of different commitment basis. That was the best way of putting it, I think. Not necessarily saying it's less commitment so much as a different one. For some people it's easy to get away for a weekend and go somewhere. For other people that's really challenging, but actually being able to do something every week really works. So we don't have that model, and I think that unless we do more to make that available to people around the country, we're always going to struggle for a big chunk of people who simply cannot access that kind of weekend competition approach. So I guess that's the sort of, the first bit is that, there are things we can do there. But beyond that, I think we're certainly going to be coming back out to try to work with people to see, what local groups want to do and sort of investigate how we can support that. And so I think we're about there. So about an hour. I'd hate to finish without stopping to say thanks to people, everyone that's played, especially those that did it with great spirit. Big thanks to people who are coaching Ultimate. Congratulations to folks that won the national championships or played or represented GB, either as a player or as our support staff, who are all fantastic. And to volunteers that are just, that are out helping stuff to happen. And, obviously I know quite a few folks on the call, and, I know some of you are doing a lot of that stuff. So thanks very much from us and, on behalf of other people. I think we're about there. Maybe people would like to have some questions. I haven't seen any come up in the chat. But if folks have got some, you're very welcome to ask them now. One we tend to ask at this point is whether an online AGM, an online AGM, or kind of doing it somewhere physical. So if folks have got a view on that, is it best like this, or would you like to have an annual dinner and an AGM all wrapped up into a big party? Interested in knowing that. But for now, we're assuming that a kind of online like this is probably what we're going to keep doing, unless we get a big wave of support for doing it a different way. Luca. So Luca said, is it possible to encourage clubs to participate in their first tournament by giving them a discount? Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, I think we would, probably do that. If you think that would make a difference. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to know if that's really the killer problem for folks, because they still often have travel costs and so on. But if you represent that team, which I guess maybe you do, given the way you've asked that question, and you think that would help, please ping us again and we can look at that. I think it's, the challenge with always that sort of thing is just kind of not accidentally creating something that sort of makes an unsustainable situation. But for sure we could do that. And I think I would say also, actually, we do sometimes do that sort of thing if somebody comes to us. We also, one of the other scenarios we're aware of with tournaments is teams that we know are kind of financed by one of the players, who then sort of does their best to get money back from the other people, but doesn't always succeed. And where we find out those folks, we do try to sort of, help them if we can. Yeah, so Jimmy's just asked about discounted multi-membership years. Yeah, so that's one of the things we're gonna look at in the context of the dropout rate. And probably we'll try that. I mean, we're aware as well, USAU, I think, do a lifetime membership. We might also look at that idea. So, yeah, Lucas, so with the question about spirit captains, the Spirit Committee have tried to sort of publish a couple of documents and ideas about that. Certainly, we are also hopeful that the Game Advisor sort of committee and having game advisors will give us another sort of group of people that can help with some of that sort of on the ground, while games are going on, people with some legitimacy for sort of offering their opinion. Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy, I don't know if you want to jump, you're welcome to jump in as well if you have anything to add. I don't know if you can, in a place where you can speak.
I have just quickly unmuted you, Jimmy. So if you talk, we should hear you, I think. Oh, maybe. I
think it's Luca. Yeah, I mean, do have a look for that stuff if you haven't already. And I suppose I'm interested in, you know, in the but I think we'd be really interested to try to find ways to give those groups more support. If you have, you know, other ideas, those materials are pretty good. I mean, I guess I wonder if you're sort of leaning towards us trying to press teams to do it.
Right, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, hi there.
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is that I'm now a spirit captain for a team, and I just find it. I've looked at the WithDef materials, but I find it really difficult to think. For example, if I look at the whole spirit scores for a season, and we have bad fairness or bad spirit of the rules or bad knowledge of the rules, how do I plan to improve that for the next season? I just think more guidance for improving a whole team spirit would be helpful, especially at uni, because I feel that spirit at uni competitions needs to improve, and especially just having more guidance and having a spirit captain, how do you treat spirit at trainings, stuff like that, I think would be really helpful. And I also feel that generally across Ultimate, a lot of teams have different opinions about how to mark spirit. For example, if it's good, you should give it a 2, but some teams give zeros out very often, and I've been in games like that, and I feel there definitely wasn't a 0. So even though there's very strict guidelines of what a 1 score, a 2 score, and a 3 score is, I still think it's not really consistent across all teams.
Yeah, hi, I'll try and address some of that. This is Jimmy. So if you can you're welcome to email the Spirit Committee anytime you like, and if you send us suggestions for the types of materials that you think that we could produce and publish, that would certainly be welcome. We do keep a very close eye on the Spirit scores. I look at them every Monday or Tuesday when they get posted, and we're actually dealing with what we thought was an inappropriate score right now. So when those things come up, we do try and treat that as a teaching moment, in terms of explaining to the different teams involved, both the score and the scoree, how they could use the scoring system a bit better. It's the scoring system is a work in progress in some sense, that educating all the teams on how to use it. But we're certainly open as a committee to further input, so please don't be shy about contacting us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
There's also a question about the mixed and open women competition structures. So yeah, in 2020, it will look pretty similar to 2019 for the time being. So we're still expecting a relatively split or sort of protected, if you like, sort of period of time for the mixed division, from March to mid-May, and then a similar protected bit for open and women's from early June to end of July. There will be an announcement of dates, at least those that we know about, in the next week or so, I think. We're well aware that it would be great to have more of them settled sooner. Again, we've had a few things up in the air. Actually, our biggest challenge this year is we're just trying to clarify whether we can get Cardiff at the end of March. And realistically, if we can't, that is probably going to force a few changes compared to what happened last year, because it's pretty unusual to be able to get such a big venue in March. And it's because we've got a long relationship with them. That's not a sort of permanent problem, but they are doing some work at that venue. So there are a couple of sort of things up in the air for us still, and apologies that we haven't been able to get them all sorted. But yes, in terms of sort of approximate expectations, then that's what you should expect it to look pretty similar to last year, at least in 2020. Hopefully that answers that question okay. Cool. Alistair, how do we get feedback? A few meetings like this, I think. It's, you know, some people get in touch with us. We're pretty open to being, you know, having feedback. My number is all over the place, and any member that wants to call me about something should feel free to do so. We did try last year to put in place a set of team representative email groups. We gave them quite a push and got a really low pickup, and so it's quite a challenge, honestly, actually. And I think, you know, sometimes one is left sort of working on the basis that if nobody yells at us, maybe we're doing sort of broadly the right thing. But it would be, we're really interested to find other ways to improve on that. And, you know, we did a pretty substantial, actually, last year, you may have seen, we did a pretty substantial run of sort of consultation calls of this nature on some of the competition things. And I think, you know, we had quite a lot of people attend them across we sort of put out lots of different dates and so on, times of day. And over the period of 2 or 3 weeks, got quite a few people in on them. So hopefully that, alongside the sort of surveys we did, at least, you know, I mean, we certainly felt we had some good input from people. But yeah, that's a challenge, actually. And, you know, look, that's why we're doing this, I suppose. And so if you've got other thoughts on other ways that you'd like to see us trying to do that, I mean, you know, please shout. But, you know, I think otherwise we are a little bit reliant on people to get in touch because they're frustrated about something, or just because they, you know, they have something they want to say. Some of it comes through some of the committees. So, for example, at the uni level, we have a few sort of structures for, there's a sort of president's page, if you like, in each region. So people representing folks in their region can kind of gather, you know, information that way. So a mixture. Hopefully that answers that.
I think,
yeah.
So just one other thing to say, Si. We also did some consultation around the strategic plan. But I think it's a valid question, Alistair, and I think, you know, as Si says, really, if there's a better way, do you think, of having a sort of an open channel for us, you know, to the board, then, you know, please, you know, make some suggestions. That's what we want to know.
Okay. Thanks. I don't know if if anyone else has got any questions raised. Hopefully that's been helpful. I just threw up a last slide with this year's, with the current national champions. We had, in fact, gosh, I missed it off the list, but we also had for the first year this year, Beach Women's Nationals, which was won by Icenia. So congrats to that team. And I'm just scanning that page for anything else, but I think that was good. It was great, and we're really hopeful that that division will now be a permanent fixture in that competition, and that we'll have all 3 divisions playing at Beach Nationals, and that hopefully it'll become too big, and that we'll have a different problem, which is how to fit everything in. Great.
Okay. So I think, unless anybody else has got any more questions, thank you very much for the questions people have asked. Alistair's just asking a question about regional development plans. Do you want to just pick that up, Si, or?
Yeah. Well, so actually, I think I'm going to now sort of fail to answer the question by sort of replying by saying that actually, grand, okay. So I think what we want to do with that is find the thing that seems most appropriate to each area. So it may well be that in Scotland, it makes sense to do it for Scotland. I could equally imagine that in Manchester or London, it might make sense to do it just for that area. But the Southwest, again, might be the entire Southwest all the way from Bristol to Falmouth, or might just be, you know, Exeter. And I think I think what we should be seeking to do really is engage with people who are keen and interested in doing something in their area and trying to find something that works for them and for that group. So that's sort of just in a way, perhaps not answering your question, but hopefully at least answering it in the sense that what we want to do is not, I don't think it makes sense to try to impose the same sort of uniform approach to that problem across the whole UK, but rather kind of find groups of people most interested in it and start there and sort of learn from what happens in each area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just to say one other thing on that side. I think that I think I just sort of emphasised really. There's no sort of one size fits all for this really. We don't really have a kind of clear plan in our heads as to about how it's going to best work. I think the issue is that we had a board call recently, and one of the discussions was about resourcing of something like this, and the recognition that we don't really have the resource to be able to put into it at the centre. So we've got to try and figure out how we can engage the wider community to help do the regional development. But I think what I'd say is, really interested to hear to find out more about what's happening in Scotland, and if the Scottish community can really push that on, then making use of sort of good practice in one area and rolling that to other places and saying, well, look, this is how it was done somewhere else, is a really good way to go. So keep up the good work really, and keep us in touch with how it goes.
I mean, I think the other bit, and I think this is already part of Alistair, the conversation that you're having there is just, it probably makes sense in a given area to sort of look at the potential sources of grant funding. And clearly in Scotland, probably Sport Scotland is the first place to start. And so again, Scotland as a sort of as a group or as a region or whatever makes some sense, whereas in other parts of the UK it might be that it's a more county level, or the active partnerships that are in other parts of the country might be a more appropriate level to sort of build that at. So I mean, really keen to, you're obviously part of that conversation. I'm dead keen to sort of catch up, so maybe we can afterwards. So I think we're about there. Do feel free to post more questions there. I guess Chris and I will sit on the call until everyone else has gone. So if you want to sort of wait, you didn't want to ask everyone a question, but you did still want to ask a question, then please do. Please just hang on, I guess. Otherwise, this has been useful, informative. If it is or isn't, maybe let us know. Otherwise, see you at some Frisbee soon somewhere. And thanks very much for taking the time to jump on the call.
Yeah. Thanks very much, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, the tech worked all right, didn't it, this year? That's good. And Mark, yes.
Right, might be a bit of a flyer, but I just unmuted everyone just in case there's anyone who didn't have keyboard access or anything.
Okay.
You need a team?
Yeah, hi Mark. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's the Saturday before mock start on Monday, so
Yeah, but it's around the corner from yours.
That's right. So she's planning to come, and yeah, she does need a team.
Okay, I think there's Wyvern, St Edmunds that are short on players. Shall I keep you posted?
Yeah, I think Ant's also got some info about teams that might need help. So yeah, if we can all stay posted on that, would be great.
Right. Sounds good. Right. See you around, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Mark.
I say bye, but I don't know how to leave.
There's an leave meeting or something.
Bye.
Bye. He's gone. We can't make him. We can't turn him off.
I can actually. I can do. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go, guys.
Cheers, Beach.
Thanks a lot. Speak soon.
See you, Beach.
Oh, hi. I think somebody was speaking, but I don't think I can hear you.
Yeah, I might just be picking up some background noise.
Yeah. Okay. If any of you are sort of hanging on to talk, please shout. Otherwise, we might start thinking you're just on the call because you can't find out how to turn it off. Thanks, Alistair. Cheers.
I guess there might be a couple of people phoned in or something like that as well whilst driving, which is not necessarily the easiest to hang up. I can't even work out. No one's microphone seems to be showing any noise.
Okay.
Input there, so
more folks going. Hey, Ant, thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye now.
Yeah, cheers, mate. See you Monday.
Yeah, see you Monday. Bye now.
see you, Anne. Have a good weekend.
You too, buddy.
Cheers.
Hi there. Are you still waiting to talk, or is it just left the phone on?
Feels like that, doesn't it?
I think so. I think it might be the latter.